Can we officially say the Mariners are buyers? What could a deal with the Cardinals look like? And what are the consequences of signing Shohei Ohtani? We'll answer that and more coming up. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Thursday, July 13th, 2023. This is Trident Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial. Check out the show. A link as well as our social accounts is in the description of this episode. Hope everyone is doing well. We're going to be going through our mailbag today. We'll also be announcing the winner of our JP for ASG giveaway later on, so be sure to stick around for that. But let's get into these questions. We're going to start here with good vibes mostly. What kind of personnel sacrifices would need to be made to allow Ohtani to sign with Seattle? Colby, we're going to have to talk about it at some point. So, what do you think?
None, because Ohtani's not signing with Seattle. Let's just be clear about this. You expected him to badmouth his host? Really? Yeah, okay. Ohtani's going to be like, nah, I don't really like it here. It stinks. Like, no, I'm not. Of course he's going to say nice things about Seattle while he's in Seattle. In terms of what would need to be sacrificed, like, this winter, not a lot. Most of your guys are, making below market anyways, and you're pretty well below the luxury tax threshold. So even if you are giving Ohtani $60 million, you should be fine. You don't have to sacrifice anything. Maybe you trade like Gino or something like that to just try and clear some space, or maybe Seawald. But you're not.
You're probably out on bringing back Teoscar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're not sacrificing a ton this winter. It's what you're sacrificing down the road, because the real money in Julio's contract hasn't kicked in yet. Castillo, again, you still owe him, $25 million a year. You're going to owe Robbie Ray's definitely opting into his contract now. So you're going to owe him $25 million. So yeah, I think down the road, 2-3 years down the road, you're basically foregoing any shot to extend Logan Gilbert and George Kirby. Maybe you can get one of them done, but you're probably not getting both. So that's a pretty big gap. You're definitely not getting Cal Raleigh done, and that's may or may not be a guy you want to get done anyways. So yeah, you're pretty much done on the major free agent front, which is something we've seen play out here in Seattle before. When the Macho Quattro or whatever they call them, the four big free agents took up, $120 million of the $180 million payroll. That ownership group wouldn't spend anymore. And part of that ownership group was John Stanton. So we'll see. If you get Ohtani, that's your big shot. And then the rest of the time, you're trading for Gene Segura, you're trading for D Gordon, you're doing what they did back in 2016, when Jerry first got here, which worked and also didn't work. Kind of depends on how you look at it. So yeah, I don't think you're sacrificing too much in the short term, but again, Ohtani's contract is going to be like 10 to 15 years. So you're going to sacrifice quite a bit in the long run, including George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, Cal Raleigh, probably Jared Kelenic at some point, although Kelenic's 6 years away from free agency. So that's not a huge deal. But yeah, you're going to sacrifice quite a bit in the long term.
Yeah, the major difference between now and when you had, Cruz and Cano, et cetera, on the books is your farm is in a much healthier spot. So maybe you can aim higher than the D Gordons and Ryan Healy's of the world to supplement your roster. But
right, and Julio and Ohtani are leaps and bounds better than Cruz, Cano, Seager, and Felix.
Right. So there's obviously that. We had a lengthy discussion about this on our Patreon a couple of days ago. For me, really, like, we know that they are going to pursue this to some degree this winter. Like, that's without question. But if they are going to get very, very real about signing Ohtani, and if I'm Jerry Dipoto, I have to have a serious conversation with John Stanton, and I need some guarantees because basically Jerry is hinging his job on this. If they were to sign Ohtani, that is the job defining move for Jerry Dipoto. So I need guarantees from Stanton that he's willing to expand payroll so I can extend guys like George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, etc. Now, you mentioned Ray. His deal will be over after 2026. That's a year after Julio's money starts to kick in. Gino will come off the books after 2024, I think is the first out. 2025 is.
I think it's a mutual option, but if it's a club option, it'll come off after next year. Any other option will be 2025.
Marco, will come off the books here pretty quick, but that's not a ton of money. But it's that like
$12 million.
That is a little, dent in it.
Yeah.
But with that as well, right, there are other guys that are going to start making arbitration, like Logan Gilbert, like George Kirby. And those, with the way that those two guys are pitching right now, once they get into ARB2, ARB3, that's going to get expensive.
Right. Gilbert, by the way, is going to have 4 years of ARB. He'll be a Super 2 this winter. So, yeah, by the time he gets to ARB, he's going to make his first $3 million or $4 million this winter. So in 2 winters, he'll probably be up making $15 million, give or take, assuming he continues to pitch this well. So, yeah, those guys, they're coming up. Kirby's going to be ARB eligible after next season. It's expensive,
Yeah. So again, if I'm Jerry Dipoto, I need, and if I'm Justin Hollander as well, I need guarantees from Stanton that he's willing to expand payroll beyond the $180 million that he's so far shown, to be his cap, right, in the past. So
right now, their competitive balance tax is closer to $200 million.
Right.
So it's payroll isn't payroll.
I'm more so talking about flat payroll, like how we see payroll,
the 26-man roster.
Yeah. How we generally talk about payroll. And look, that's not necessarily because I need to go out and add another $300 million contract after Ohtani. You don't need to do that to build a World Series contender around Julio and Ohtani and Kirby, etc. But I have to be able to keep those guys. I have to be able to still add, complementary pieces here and there. I still have to have the freedom to be able to go and do that. So that's the only way that it really makes sense for me. But we know for a fact that they are going to go after Ohtani. We'll see how aggressive they get and how real that possibility becomes in the winter. But yeah.
I think that the Mariners will be really truly aggressive on Ohtani. I think that they will put forth more than just a PR effort into signing him. And I do think Ohtani does have Seattle on his short list of 2 or 3 teams that he would consider. The issue is that the Dodgers are probably number 1 on his list, and the Dodgers are probably going to put forth the most aggressive offer for him anyway. So you kind of have 2 things going against you, but yeah.
The other thing though is like we don't really know what Ohtani wants. Like we think we know what Ohtani wants.
But I think we have a fairly good idea. Like it's hard to paint a scenario where Ohtani is going to pick Seattle over the Dodgers.
I'm not even really talking about that. I'm like, does he consider New York now? Right. I know that you think that he wants to stay on the West Coast, but like, does he consider going out that way if the money is there? Or at least to expand his market, does he entertain those teams?
I don't think. I mean, who knows more about being used as leverage than the city of Seattle?
Right.
So yeah, that's always a possibility. So we'll see. But yeah, there are consequences down the road to signing Ohtani, and you have to decide, or Jerry and Justin have to decide, is it worth it? And they might think the answer is yes. And if they do, we'll see. But that's going to require a commitment from Stanton. That if Jerry comes to them next July after they sign Ohtani and they say, we need $3 million more to trade for this guy, Stanton's not going to go, no, we're already at $200 million. Like we're out. No more money. That's what I'm worried about.
We need to move on here real quick, but just real fast. The reason why I bring up, leverage or the possibility of him using other teams as leverage is because I think whatever deal he ends up signing is going to be incentive laden, at least to a certain degree, based on, at bats and innings pitched down the road, because any team that is going to, offer him a 10, 11 million, year deal is going to have to know or is going to have some sort of safety net in case he ends up only doing one of the two things. If he only, hits, or if he only pitches, 5 years into the contract. So we'll see. It's going to be a really complicated situation. And it's one that's definitely going to take some time. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't end up signing until like January, because of just how complicated the contract situation is going to be.
Yeah.
Because this is unprecedented. We've never seen someone like this hit the market.
Yeah. One other thing I would say, and really fast, I think Ohtani is going to make multiple visits. So I don't think he's just going to sit down and say, "Yep, I'm going to sign here." Blah. I think he's probably going to go to the Dodgers. He's probably going to visit, an East Coast team. He's probably going to visit the Rangers. He's probably going to visit the Mariners or San Francisco or something like that. I think this one will get dragged out a little bit.
For sure. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of hand wringing during the off season. So we'll see how it goes. All right, we got more questions coming up here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Sleeper. Are you using the Sleeper app for daily fantasy baseball? I am. Want to times your money by 100? Sleeper is now offering up to a 100 times payout for up to 8 pick contests. Choose as many as 8 players that you like and pick more or less on your favorite baseball stats like home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right and you can win big. Making your picks is easy and takes only 30 seconds or less. And if you win, you can withdraw your payout safe and quickly. Use promo code LOCKED ON and you'll get up to $100 matched on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Baseball is back tomorrow. It's been a rough few days without the Mariners, but thankfully they are back tomorrow. They're playing the Tigers. You can catch all the action on the Mariners hometown broadcast to SiriusXM via the SXM app. Before we get into more of your questions, time to announce the winner of our JP or ASG giveaway. Of course, Colby is giving away a signed Luis Castillo card. We asked you guys to help us out and try and get JP Crawford into the All-Star game. We did not accomplish that. However, we saw a great response from you guys, both on Twitter and via email. And our winner comes via email. Tim Pizik? Not sure how to pronounce Pizik.
Yep.
So Tim, congratulations on winning. I know Colby has already reached out to you to get you squared away and get you your card. So yeah, congratulations. Now, folks, we got another giveaway coming up pretty soon here. We're going to announce that on Monday, and you guys definitely want to get involved in that, especially if you want to see the Mariners play towards the end of this month. But more details on that on Monday. All right, let's hop back into these questions here. Andy wants to know, how does the loss of Max Weiner affect the development of pitching in the minors? Feels like he was a pretty important piece in our system. Colby.
Yeah, the unfortunate answer to this is I don't know. Now, Max Weiner was a huge part of this organization, and it is a loss. There's really no question about that. How much of one, I don't know, because what matters now is who you bring in to replace him. So obviously, that's one of Jerry right now, since he's in charge of everything. That's one of his biggest priorities, is to find somebody he trusts, and I'm sure he has a couple guys in mind already. We'll see if they go outside the org like they did with the new player development director, Justin Toole, or if they promote from within. It'll be interesting to see, what they do there. But the simple truth of the matter is I don't know how, if or when this affects the Mariners development system, because I don't have that information to share with you guys, because as much as I know, that Max Weiner is respected and he is an industry, like across the industry, he is well respected, and there's nobody who doesn't think this isn't some kind of big loss for Seattle. But how much so, I don't know, because it kind of depends on who they bring in to replace him, and whether it doesn't really matter who they bring in. I'm not going to know enough to tell you guys whether it's a massive downgrade or not. So the unfortunate answer is I don't know.
Right. Yeah, same. But just speaking on him specifically, yeah, it is a big loss because he was very clearly instrumental in the development of their pitching prospects, and we've seen how that's played out at the big league level now with guys like Bryce Miller and Brian Wu and George Kirby and Logan Gilbert. So yeah. All right. Next question here comes from Scott. In your view, are there any tradable prospects in the system? I know it's dependent upon the price, but don't feel like anyone is untouchable right now, even Ford and Young. You would be correct. Everyone has price.
Yes. The question was asked, is there anybody untradable in the system, not tradable? So Ty, you said tradable.
Did I?
Yes. But either way, at the end of the day, the answer, yes, everybody is tradable. So therefore, no, nobody is untradable. Absolutely not. There are no untouchables in the system. There's probably only 3 or 4 untouchables on the 26-man roster. So yeah, Jerry and Justin are going to use every avenue they have to try and get better. And there's nobody in the system that shouldn't be on the block for the right player. So no. The Mariners haven't had an untouchable prospect. I mean, aside from Julio, in about, 10, 15 years, probably since Felix. Some close guy, Kelnick, Gilbert, pretty close to untouchable, but no. Everybody in that system is fair game.
Yep. There's a price for everyone. I'm going to roll the tapes back, though. I'm pretty sure I said untradeable. Maybe you just didn't hear it.
We know you're not going to, though.
I'm going to.
Okay.
Alex wants to know, what's the most likely trade between the Cardinals and the Mariners? Colby, you and I are going to dive into this a bit more on the on our Patreon show today.
No. Don't mislead people.
160.
Yes, don't mislead people, though, because the trade we're going to talk about today is not likely at all, let alone the most likely. But it is between the Mariners and the Cardinals.
We're not just talking about that, though. Though I have an even crazier trade idea that I thought of today.
Interesting.
But for the off season, not for now.
Well, we're kind of whatever. We'll get to it.
I just want to talk about it just to get it out there into the open.
I tease this on Twitter, by the way, and we have gotten like 4 or 5 new free trials, which you guys can sign up for. Patreon.com/controlthezone, which you can listen to this episode that's coming out today and decide if you want to participate. But so people are interested in this crazy but also somewhat sensible trade that we're going to talk about today, but it's not likely, so it doesn't fall into what Alex's question. So start with the obvious caveat that no trade in the history of the world is ever likely to happen. That's just the reality. I don't know. We talked about this as well. I don't think the Cardinals are as clean of a trade fit as, in this case, Morosi seems to think, because I don't think that it makes sense to trade Brian Wu or Bryce Miller for any of their bats. Any of them. That includes Lars Nootbaar. That includes Nolan Gorman. I don't think that's I don't think that's a good decision by the Mariners. So what's most likely to happen if they made a trade? Probably somebody like Paul DeYoung or somebody like Carlson, who is, just a solid everyday player, about a league average bat, helps you defensively, but not going to cost, he's going to cost you farm system guys, not major leaguers. So I think DeYoung is probably the most likely, and I would throw Carlson in there. We've heard that the Mariners like him, and I was looking at his numbers last night. He's 25 years old or 24 years old. He'll turn 25 shortly. Former top prospect, which we know Jerry loves. He's got major league seasoning, another thing Jerry loves, but he hasn't quite taken off. He's just kind of seems like he's just an average major leaguer, at least through what is now his 3rd full season in St. Louis. So one of those two guys seems most likely. Also, Jordan Montgomery is the guy that I could definitely see being swapped, because he makes sense for the Mariners as well. So I'm sorry if you're hoping for a Lars Nootbaar for Brian Wu trade, but I don't think that's likely at all.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen either. And I would agree with you that I don't have a trade structure in mind, but I think most likely player from the Cardinals to get dealt to Seattle would be Paul DeYoung right now. If I had to put money on it. Yeah.
Yep. And I think, most likely player to go from the Mariners to St. Louis, probably Hancock would be my guess, but
I don't think DeYoung would cost Hancock.
No, I don't either.
Yeah.
DeYoung, and because DeYoung's got 2 more years of club control left, but he is at best an average major leaguer.
Yeah.
And, Hancock is probably at best a number 4 starter. But maybe
that
like
would just
DeYoung,
feel like you're selling low on Hancock for the sake of it.
I mean, you're higher on Hancock than I am, but I think, maybe DeYoung and Montgomery for Hancock straight up, maybe something like that. But
maybe.
I think DeYoung's going to be a little bit cheaper.
Yeah. All right. We got a few more questions coming up here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Now, I hate shopping for summer clothes. I just want to be comfortable, no matter if I'm at the ballpark, back at home, recording an episode of Locked On M's. Oftentimes, though, I find myself settling for clothes that feel cheap, tight, and restricting, and make me sweat in all the wrong places. Gross. I know. Thankfully, Bird Dogs has me, and therefore you, and Colby, covered. Their wide selection of insanely comfortable shorts, joggers, sweatpants, polos, and more have me ready for any occasion this summer throws my way. I mean, who doesn't love stretchy fabric and built-in underwear? It's time to look good, feel good, and play good this summer. Go to birddogs.com/lockedonmlb for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. Look, it's this one right here that I use all the time on the show. That's birddogs.com/lockedonmlb for a free Yeti-style tumbler. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Again, Mariners, Tigers, tomorrow night. Catch all the action on the Mariners hometown broadcast with SiriusXM via the SXM app. All right, let's get back into these questions here on a rare Mailbag Thursday. Gregory wants to know, how much stock should we put into Scott Boras's comments this past week on the Mariners and difficulties signing free agents? Colby, I know you would love to talk about this.
0.
Yeah,
Scott Boras is mad that the Mariners won't give him more money than his client is worth. Oh no. Who would have ever guessed he'd have a negative opinion of Seattle? It's nothing.
On top of that, there are hardly any Scott Boras clients in the Mariners organization right now. I think Cal Raleigh, maybe a couple others. I don't keep up with who. Yeah, I don't keep up with who everyone's agent is, to be fair, but yeah, I think it might only be Cal Raleigh.
The overwhelming odds are that nobody gives Scott Boras less money in Major League Baseball than the Mariners. And that is why they're not serious about winning. It's not because they're not out here trying to win. And it's not because they haven't won in the last 2 years and are poised to do it again for a third year. It's because they're not giving his clients money, so they're not serious about winning.
Well, Colby, obviously the Rockies were very serious about winning when they signed Chris Bryant after they let Trevor Story walk for absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Scott Boras cares about one thing and one thing only: his legacy. I want to be the super agent. I'm the best agent that's ever lived. So if you don't give me money, I'm going to bash you to the national media. I don't care.
Right.
I don't care.
And he has his finger on the pulse of pretty much everything. And he knows that, what the reputation of the Mariners is right now, and, what a comment like that could do. Right.
It's not going to help. It's not going to make the Mariners want to sign Boras agents or Boras players more. I'll tell you that much. So no, you don't. Scott Boras is a lot like, cable network news. Just ignore it. Like it's there with an agenda. It's not factual. It's you're not giving me money, so I'm going to trash talk you.
Also, another thing to keep in mind, one of the few Boras clients as of late in Seattle, Yusei Kikuchi, they declined their 4-year option on him, so there's been a lot of splitting up between these two sides. James Paxton is another guy that's a Boras client, so just there's a lot of context here to consider when looking at these comments from Boras.
Yeah. It's a nothing burger.
Dennis wants to know, do you think it's official that we are buyers at the trade deadline? I feel like all signs point to yes. If so, who do you think the teams will be in talks with and for who? Look, I don't think they're buyers based off of what they do the rest of the way, right? I think they're going to buy no matter what, because they're in a position to contend next year, whether or not they make the playoffs this year, right? Because of just where their roster is. They're one of those teams like if they don't make the playoffs, they're one of those teams like the Padres, the Mets, etc. Very different structures of their roster, but still, where their rosters currently are, they're in a better position to just retool and go after it again next year. So, yeah, I think the Mariners are, even if they lose 7 of the next 10, which please God don't, but if they do, they're still going to go into the deadline trying to add probably a club controlled bat and maybe some pitching. They might take a flyer on a reliever that they like, because Jerry DiPoto always does that, right? I still think that they're going to add some pieces to the major league roster no matter what happens.
Yeah. That they're going to buy somewhat. They might buy and sell a little, but they're going to buy something or some things. So yeah, they're definitely buyers in some sense, in terms of, are they going to be like the super aggressive on Jahmyr Candelario if they lose 7 of the next 10? No, probably not.
No.
Does it mean they're not going to try and go get a controllable bat, or maybe even a guy who's, club controlled through next year, maybe a starter or something like that? Yeah, they're going to try to do that. So yeah, they're buyers. Very little doubt about
that. They could
that.
still go out and trade for like Paul DeYoung, because Paul DeYoung is controlled beyond this year.
Right. And he's probably, there's your second baseman for next year, at least in theory. So yeah, it's just one of those things. If they're not buying for 2023, they're still trying to buy for 2024. So they'll be buyers.
All right. Last question of the day comes from Andy, who asked the question earlier. Let's say it's the offseason and you want to trade Emerson Hancock. Ignoring team fit, who are some positional players that you think are roughly the same value as Hancock? It's kind of a difficult question to ask, because one, we don't really know how Hancock is valued around the league. But I still like a trade that, Colby, you brought up during the offseason, actually. A swap between the Orioles and the Mariners, where the Mariners would get forgetting his name all of a sudden, second baseman, not
Connor
Kobe
Norby.
Mayo, Connor Norby. Thank you. I always mix him up with Kobe Mayo. So yeah, Connor Norby and Emerson Hancock. Kind of wonder if that would be a possibility.
Yeah, you're probably looking at a prospect swap, because I don't know what Hancock is valued at. I will say the closest trade that I found over the last couple off seasons, and keep in mind the last couple off seasons have not been normal, but the closest one I found was that the Rangers were able to the Rangers were able to get a couple of prospects for 1 year of Lance Lynn. And the lead prospect of that was Dane Dunning. And I feel like that's, kind of Emerson Hancock like in terms of value. So that netted them 1 year of Lance Lynn. They had to tack on a pretty decent prospect also, but not like a mega prospect. So, and I don't know who's the equivalent of Lance Lynn, the position player. I don't know. But you're probably trading Hancock for 1 year of a guy. Maybe it's another Teoscar Hernandez, like Hancock for a year of Teoscar. It kind of depends on how how other clubs value Hancock and how the Mariners do as well. I'm sure the Mariners don't love the idea of trading, Hancock for a 1 year guy, but sometimes that's what the market dictates. So yeah, I think you're either doing it for like another similar prospect at a different position, or you're doing it for probably a 1 year Teoscar Hernandez type of bat. I think is probably the most you can hope to get for Hancock this winter, but who knows? Maybe somebody falls in love with him. Definitely possible.
Yeah, it's certainly possible, especially, with how much of a premium is put on pitching. You'd never know. And maybe there's someone out there that still thinks, and again, I know you're going to roll your eyes at this, but maybe there's someone out there that still thinks that Hancock's the number 3, that he still has that ceiling. So if that's the case, then maybe there's a deal there. But we'll see how it goes. I feel like if the Mariners continue to win, if they're in a position where they start to get like aggressive and they're actually looking to add impact rentals, I think Hancock's gone for sure. I don't think Hancock is going to survive the deadline in Seattle.
Yeah,
if that's the case.
Yeah, he's the top 10 prospect most likely to be dealt.
Yeah,
that's my opinion. But again, we'll see, because the Mariners kind of need pitching depth right now. So if they're not getting a starter back this summer, they might have to hold on to Hancock, because they are going to need some innings. Not for Bryce Miller, by the way. Stop asking us that. Bryce Miller is not on an innings cap. Okay. If it is, it's like 160 because he threw 133 last year and he's at 80 this year. He's got 80 more innings left. By the time he makes his next start, there's going to be fewer than 70 games to play. That's like 15 starts at 5 innings apiece. He's not on an innings limit. Stop. Brian Wu, they will have to replace. Bryce Miller, if he's healthy and producing, he's going to be in the rotation for the rest of the year.
That's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Trident Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez. That's DANEGNZLZ. And Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok as well over at Locked On Mariners. That's one word, Locked On Mariners. Same at for our new Threads account as well. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Again, the Mariners are back tomorrow. You can catch all the action on the Mariners hometown broadcast with SiriusXM via the SXM app. Happy to have baseball back. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.